second to respond during today's session. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jen to begin her session today.
Thank you, Farrell, for that introduction. As Farrell stated, today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on front-end best practices and self-checkout best practices. Also going to go over a few tips and tricks that we have about running on the front end to try to make the process smoother. This is not meant to be a training, but it is meant to enhance the training so that you can utilize the system to make it work better and help with a smoother customer experience. I'm going to start off with the front end best practices and go into some of the tips and tricks that I've gone over to our support center and kind of queried them on some topics that they get questioned on a lot. And then after that, we're going to switch over to the self-checkout best practices. So to start with, I have up on the screen, pretty basic looking way that we usually start off with our front end terminals. One of the best practices that we usually recommend when using the front end is to streamline the buttons on the screen. The more buttons that you have on each screen layout can make it more cluttered and a little bit more difficult for the cashier to be able to operate as they're hunting for a key. We try to work with you to make sure that we're getting the functionality that you would like and have it easily accessible for the cashier. There is multiple screens available on the front end, so they can go through the different screens. There's a function menu where we have a lot of different functionalities. There's also a manager menu where there's generally the functions that are locked down to manager access. And then the main screen, which is the main screen that the cashier is going to be using when they're just generally operating. The cleaner this is, the easier it is for them to use. Also, the idea that this is a touch screen, so they need to be able to touch the buttons with their finger. If you start putting way too many buttons on these screens, we have noticed that cashiers will have harder time actually hitting the right button. So getting it down to just the baseline functionality on what you want to have on the screen and what the cashier is going to be utilizing the most often is what we do suggest as a best practice. One of the functionalities that we do suggest at STCR that is very useful for the cashier that we have on the front screen is the flip chart. The flip chart is a way that the cashiers can easily look up non-barcoded items. What that means is your produce and your vegetable items that come in with like the 4-digit PLU, sometimes they have the little stickers on them, sometimes they don't. This allows the cashier to be able to quickly look up those items. This is a very easily customized solution that you can do yourself. Generally speaking, when they do the flip chart, we have it open right up to the ones that I just mentioned, produce and vegetables. That seems to be the ones that the little barcodes fall off and that the cashiers generally need to use. I have my lab set up to go to family codes, and it lists the various family codes that I utilize here. And then the cashier would be able to go quickly into produce and have it sorted. And they can find the item that is being brought up. There is a search tool over here. They could type in if you have a lot of produce items, that way they can easily go to W for watermelon, whatever it may be. And then they can select the item and bring it in. A lot of customers like to have it so that this opens up right in here and has all these pictures. And it's a question commonly asked, how do we add items to the flip chart and how do we add items so that they have pictures? The way that we do this, it's split up by family code, department, subdepartment report code. In the item maintenance screen, you come up with a new family code if you want it to show up there. This is all under the auxiliary drop-down menu for family codes. If you're looking for anything else that's listed over there, like subdepartment, department, category, they're all here as well. I'm just going to focus on family codes. So you just come up with a family code. You want to make a new one that's going to show up. You would just come in, add a new one, give it a number, and then that description is going to be what shows up. And then over here on each item record, you want to show up under that flip chart, you just assign that to the family code. So anything I want to show up under produce has a family code of 1. And that's all you need to do, deploy this down to the lanes and it will show up. Second part is how do I get a picture? Again, this is something, if you want to have pictures added, if you go into your Storeman folder and there is a bitmaps directory, all you need to do is add the picture that you would like to show up in here. It's smaller the better. You shouldn't make these too large. and they just need to be named to the UPC code that you are looking to link it to. It is padded out to 13 digits. So you can see right here, here's my watermelon. I have it padded out 4031 with all of the leading digits. It has to be 13 digits. It's JPEG or BMP. Drop it in here and then it will start showing up. There's a scheduled job that deploys bitmaps down to the lanes at regular intervals. We can work with you on that if you want to have it more often, but that's something easily done. If you're adding a new produce item, just have to assign it to the right family code or whatever you're using, and then just find a picture, take a picture if you want with your camera, and then just name it to that UPC code. Another best practice that we've found is that kind of aligns with this is that allows you to find non-barcoded items. What if you have more items that something gets scratched off, the UPC code gets crumpled up? There is the ability to do an item search. I have this under my function menu. There is the ability to have a search items. We do suggest that you have this somewhere on one of your screens. It may not have to be on the front screen, but something that you may want to use. That way the cashier is not having to call back for price check or a barcode. They can use this and do search items, and they can search by item description, subdepartment category, department, family code, report code. There is a keyboard. As you are on a touch screen, you don't generally have a keyboard attached. So you can use your on-screen keyboard, and the cashier can then look, hit launch with their criteria, and then they can find the item. Oh, that was my lemons. And they can select the item and sell the item right there in the transaction. So it allows them to not have to make the customer wait while they're trying to find the right barcode or trying to enter in the item manually. If they can read the barcode, it gives them that flexibility. The other one that we suggest that having, especially if you're running a frequent shopper, is the ability to search customers. If you're using a frequent shopper program, the ability to look up a customer, generally they have a phone number or a physical card that you can look up in, but maybe the customer forgot their card and they changed their phone number, or they can't remember what phone number they linked it to. There is a search customers that's very similar to the searched items. So they can come in, search items. Again, they have the on-screen keyboard that they can use as they don't have a keyboard attached, and they can look by the customer's name, last name, first name, telephone, city. Once they put the criteria and launch, find the customer, oh, that's Mary, and then they select it and it enters that customer right in the transaction and starts giving them their discounts and deals. Along with that, if you are running frequent shopper, after this we'll go off frequent shopper, but a lot of people want to have the ability to enter new customers at the lane. So if you are running a frequent shopper, a best practice that we generally suggest having is the ability to enter customers at the lane. It may not be the way that you're always going to enter in the customers, but it gives the ability so that way, if you do have somebody decide to sign up for the frequent shopper program and they want to start getting their points, Mary has points on her, so I want to be able to get these customers right in the transaction so they can start getting their discounts and get their points accumulation. There is the ability to do that. I have it locked up under a manager, my manager menu. Again, this is up to you if you want the cashiers to be able to do this and where you want the buttons to be. And all that they need to do is they take the card, if they have a physical card, I want to sign up for the frequent shopper. They hand the card or you type in the phone number. You hit the buttons, and then I'm going to go ahead and enter in a phone number, and it's going to say this customer does not exist. Do you want to create it? Well, yes, we do. So they can hit OK, and the cashier can enter in the information right here. This does slow down the front end a little bit. So they do have the on-screen keyboard, so they can type in the information. What they can do if you're trying to just get the customer's bare minimum information in to get them started, you can say just have them enter in like the first name, last name. So you can see it's not the easiest to navigate, but you can just say, just get the first name and last name. So my name, right? And then the customer level and risk level. So they want to make sure that the cashier can double tap on here, and it will pull up, and they can assign it to, they're going to be a preferred customer, hit OK. And then they can go ahead and enter them right into the transaction, and they can fill out a form if you want to get more information later. So if you want to get a phone number to do phone number lookup, if you want to get their address, anything, email address, anything like that, the cashier can enter that right here, but if you wanted to just get the basic information with that number and then they could fill out a form later to be entered in the back, that's a little quicker. They can do that, but they can take this information, enter the customer, it automatically enters them in, and they start getting their points. They start accumulating that right away while you're still building that customer profile in the back. So if you are running a frequent shopper program, that is something we do suggest having as a best practice. Moving from best practices, I did talk to our support center and I got a few tips and tricks that they came up with that they frequently get calls about that they think would be useful to go over to make sure that this functionality is available at the lane if you need it and you understand the functionality. So the first thing that they came up with was the shifts and toggles, how they work and how the cashier can utilize them to speed up the front end process. Occasionally, your cashier is going to be ringing up items. I'm going to go ahead and ring up a different item here, and they're going to notice that an item is not flagged properly. Obviously, you want to go correct that item in the back, but to get this customer moving, we want to be able to fix this item right away. This customer is coming up and they're saying, hey, you're charging me for tax 1 and tax 2. This item is not supposed to be charging tax 2. That's only for cigarettes. So the cashier can use these keys right here, the tax shift key. What this does is toggle. So since the tax 2 flag is on, they can say tax shift and what one they need to toggle on or off. Since it's on, we need to toggle it off so they can say tax plan 2, enter, and then scan the item. And what that will do is it toggles this off. So now they're not being charged tax 2. If they need to toggle both tax 1 and 2, you can do tax shift 1, 2, enter. You could do tax shift 1, 2, enter, scan in that same item, and it will take both of those off. It's only good for the item that you're scanning it in right away. It's only good for that one item registration. Same applies with scale shift. Maybe an item got flagged scaled incorrectly, and it's asking for a weight when it's not a weighable item. They can hit scale shift and then scan the item, and it will stop the item from being scalable. So my bananas were flagged scalable. They were not supposed to be. It takes it off, so now I'm not being prompted for scalability. And if maybe an item needs to be weighed, you can use this and weigh the item. Food stamp. If the item was flagged food stamp and it wasn't supposed to be food stampable, they can toggle that off. Or if it was supposed to be food stampable, they can toggle it on. The one that this does not work with, and we have this out, is WIC. With the prevalence of eWIC in all the states, either eWIC or SmartWIC, that flagging comes directly from the state now. It used to be a flag on the item for the paper WIC, but with the prevalence of eWIC and SmartWIC, which is in all states now, this does not work for that. Those flagging comes directly from the state. You can't toggle the WICability of an item on and off anymore. So that is no longer relevant. If anybody is trying to utilize that, it will no longer work. Another question that they helped us came over with was refunds. There is 2 different ways to do refunds in the system. Depending on what lane that the cashier may be running on, depends on what functionality they may want to use. The refund key will just refund the one item that they're scanning. So if you're in the middle of a transaction, I have several items in my transaction, they can use the refund key. They can scan the item they want to refund, and it will prompt for the amount. So cashier can check the receipt. They actually bought it for $1, not $1.25, which is what it is right now. Enter, and that one item is refunded. Generally speaking, refund key is what you'll see on regular front end lanes. Refund mode will put the entire transaction into refund mode. Can't do this in the middle of an order. It's not going to let you. The transaction's already started. So you can tender out your transaction, and then the next transaction you can do your refund mode. And then you hit 1, enter, and then all the items that you scan are now going to be refunded. So it's not going to show as a negative, but it's going to say refund mode, and the balance is the balance due. So they can scan in multiple items, and at the end of the transaction, subtotal, and then they can refund back to whatever tender that you need to refund back to. It's also a common question that comes up. How do I refund back to a credit card? How do I refund back to a debit card or food stamps? This is how you would do that. You need to tell the system how much to refund back to. You can do that by scanning in the items, which is the correct way to do that so that your inventory is right if the items are coming back. Or you can just do an open ring for the dollar amount, and then you come in and tender the transaction as normal. You can see it very clearly says a refund due, so this money is going back to the customer, and then you choose the tender that it's going back to. So if you choose credit, it'll go back to, it'll ask you, you can have the system prompt for an auth ID that you can get so that you make sure that you're refunding back to the same card. And it will take that, the customer will swipe the card or insert the card like normal, and it will go through. Along with that is with payment types, not just refund, is the ability to take split payments. This is if you are coming in and you have a customer that comes in and they want to be able to pay partial credit, partial cash. There is the ability to do that, of course. There is an order that needs to be done. The way that I usually remember this is that you want to take the most specific to least specific. What does that mean? eWIC is the most specific tender that you can take, or SmartWIC. Both are the same. They are prescription based. So each customer coming in with an eWIC card or SmartWIC card has a certain amount that they can use. They have to get a dozen eggs, or they can get formula, or they can get milk. And it's exactly how much they can get. Each month they get like a certain allotment. So it's very specific. They have to buy that item, and that item is flagged very specifically in the back. That when you buy this gallon of milk, it takes away a gallon from their prescription. The eWIC should always be taken first. The next is food stamps. Food stamp items have to be flagged food stampable. It's not as specific as eWIC. They don't have to buy specific items. They don't get like a certain allotment of milk or eggs or formula, whatever it may be. They just get a general amount, and those items are flagged food stampable. So it's specific, but not as specific. So this would be what should be taken second. And then credit, debit, cash, that works for anything that's not specific at all. So that should be the last tender taken. So it should always go eWIC, EBT, any other tender after that. If you don't follow those, you can cause issues on the system, what we like to call unpredictable behavior, because the system is going to try to go back and recalculate the amount. You pay cash, and then you try to take eWIC. The cash could have applied to an eWICable item. If it's pretty simplistic, it will usually be okay. But if you start getting complicated where they took cash, then EBT, then eWIC, the system is going to be trying to apply EBT and eWIC to the same item, and it's going to cause unpredictable behavior. It can cause the system to lock up. It can cause the system to start adding items and payments instead of subtracting properly. So just that general rule of thumb, most specific to least specific. And then the other thing is that after taking a payment, so if you are doing a split payment, you can't go back and void an item, and you can't go back and apply a coupon. The same reason applies. So I'll just add another item to my transaction, but if you are taking items and suppose you take food stamps, you said, I want to take $10 in food stamps. I don't have any food stampable items, so I'm just going to say $10 credit. And then it's going to leave me $16.52, and I go back and I try to void an item. If you're voiding out an EBT item, if you're voiding out a WIC item, or you're adjusting the amount, the system has to do a bunch of recalculations, and it will again cause unpredictable behavior. Newer versions don't allow you to void anymore. So if you come back and you try to void an item, it will actually not allow you to, but you can void the payment and then void the item. That's the correct way to do it. So if you do come in, you try to, keep hitting the dollar amount, sorry, void previous, it's going to say the line cannot be voided. But I can come in and I can void the payment, which will refund it back to the card, and then I can void this. And it will allow me to. That's the proper way to do it. And like, again, it's stopping the system from doing a bunch of recalculation on the item. The last thing that they wanted me to bring up, going along with payment, suspending an order after taking payment. not a good best practice to do. The reason being is that if the customer has paid with an electronic form of payment, they are charged for that amount. And if they are leaving the store and you're suspending the order after taking payment, it should come up and say cannot suspend an EFT transaction. But if they do allow you to, it will stop, it'll allow it to, it'll not stop the payment from being taken out of the customer's account. So that way the customer is going to come back saying, I was charged $10, but I didn't leave in my merchandise, so it was suspended. Again, newer versions of SMS don't allow you to do this, but there is older versions that would, there was a setting that you could allow suspend after EFT transactions. Best practice is not to do that because the customers usually are not very happy about coming back and finding out that they paid however much and they didn't actually leave with their merchandise. So just a good general rule of thumb. So I'm going to be switching from this over to self-checkouts best practices. Due to the constraints with self-checkouts and the software, I wasn't able to set up a lab. So I have a slideshow that I put up with best practices for self-checkouts. If you're unfamiliar with self-checkouts, it has SMS running and then another piece of software running on top of it. So it's called Check Software. So with those, I was not able to get that set up to be able to show a lab environment. So I did do this as a slideshow. So some best practices for self-checkouts for operational. If you are going to be utilizing self-checkout, bulky items, there is a pass around feature that you can do. What that allows you to do is if you have a large item, like a 24 pack of water, a big bag of dog food, something heavy, you don't want to have the customer lift up the item, scan it, and have to put it in the bagging area to make sure that the weight registers before then picking it up again and putting it into the cart. There is a pass around feature that allows the bypassing of the weighable after being scanned. It's a good rule of thumb, best practice to make sure those items are flagged so that way the customer is not inconvenienced by having to pick up all these items, scan, and then put them down and then pick them up and put them back down. And it also allows them to use the handheld that's attached to the self-checkout easily to be able to scan these items. Another best practice is with the prevalence of reusable bags. A lot of states are starting to ban plastic bags. So customers are bringing in their own reusable bags. If they have a little bit more weight to them than a plastic bag, plastic bags don't actually really register. They're so light, but these reusable bags can be quite heavy. So there is a reusable bag feature on the self-checkout. If you're in a state that does have a plastic bag ban or is going to have a plastic bag ban, that you can come in, there'll be a button on the self-checkout, use my own bag. It'll ask you how many bags so the customer can take the bags, hit use my own bag, take all the bags and weigh them beforehand. And it'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, we can work with you on how many. 6 bags. It takes the weight of the bags, divide it by 6, and then the customer doesn't have to worry about the weight of their bags affecting the item weight. Another best practice is restricted items. Point of sale, so the SMS application is affecting if an item cannot be sold, if it's restricted by age, date, or time of day. If you have a restriction on selling alcohol before 10 a.m., obviously age restriction for alcohol, that's all controlled and all done. Nothing special has to be done, but the shopper assistant needs to make sure that they're of legal age to sell them. Run into this problem where the shopper assistant was 18 and in a state that you have to be 21 to be able to sell the alcohol, not purchase, but sell it as well. And that shopper assistant wasn't of a legal age. You want to try to make sure it's as quick and smooth as possible so the shopper assistant doesn't have to call somebody else over that's of age. They should be of age just like the regular lanes that you might be selling those items at to try to get them out as quickly as possible. Every state is different if you live in a state that doesn't have that age restriction, of course. Also, along with the shopper assistant, I'm going to go into the shopper assistant's best practices as well, but you want to make sure that those shopper assistants are fully aware of anything that they have to manually control. Discounts, any alternate pricing, sales restriction, gift cards, selling add-ons, fees, bags. They should be well-versed on anything that they need to handle at the self-checkout. So that way they're on top of things to be able to go over and assist the customer as quickly as possible. The idea is to make it a smooth process so that way the customer will want to come back and use the self-checkout. The better aware and trained that the shopper assistant is, the more likely the customers are to reuse the self-checkouts. The last best practice for self-checkouts before I go to shopper assistance is utilizing the quick lookups for non-barcoded items. Just like the flip charts on the front end that help the cashier, the quick lookups are the flip charts of the self-checkouts to help the customer. So when they come up with PLU items like bananas, apples, grapes, that they don't have the barcode for, they're very unlikely to know the PLU number for, they can use the quick lookups on the self-checkout, the same way the flip charts work. So there's a quick lookup button. It will open up a screen that they can then easily find the item. There is searchability at the top that they can pick the letter to try to search faster. You can also categorize them by fruits and veggies, and then they can easily find the item or they can search by it. It's just as important to make sure your quick lookups are as up to date as it is to make sure your flip charts are up to date for the cashiers. If cashiers are unlikely to remember PLUs, your customers aren't going to remember the PLUs. I did do a webinar on how to add quick lookup items. So if you are utilizing this feature and want more information, you can refer back to that and how to add quick lookups. The last thing I wanted to talk about was shopper assistant best practices. The shopper assistant is very important in the self-checkout process. So making sure that they have some best practices to follow is just as important. They are the person who is going to be getting people to use the self-checkout and hopefully reuse the self-checkout. So they want to make sure they're greeting customers, that they're encouraging customers to try the self-checkouts, that they can answer any questions that come up, and educate the customers as they're using them, as well as managing traffic flow. If they have a lot of self-checkouts out there and there's one open, they have a line, they're making sure that the customer's seeing, hey, you know, self-checkout 92 is open, to get that line moving. The point of having a self-checkout is that nice ability to have 5, 6, 7 registers running, however many it is, with one person running them, not having to have a cashier on each one. So you want to keep the people moving through it so that that encourages the customers from coming in and but encourages customers to use the self-checkouts every time they come in. They should also make sure that they're monitoring all the customers as they're using them. So if they see somebody getting frustrated, they can go over body language. They can make sure that they go over in the system. Obviously, there is the lights on the self-checkouts that can tell them that as well. The last thing is, I kind of just went over this, is that they want to facilitate the transactions, make sure they're assisting them quickly, making sure that they're making the whole self-checkout experience enjoyable so that they'll use them again. The point is to get them to use the self-checkouts when they come back in. If they have a bad experience on a self-checkout, most customers, if they have a bad experience, they don't want to reuse it again. So that's a big part of the shopper assistance part, is to make sure that it's enjoyable. And they also want to make sure that it's clean. One of the things about self-checkouts versus regular registers are cashier facing. Obviously, you want to keep that decluttered and you want to keep it clean, but the customer doesn't see that. With the self-checkouts, they see it. So any spills, debris, shopping carts, baskets, they want to make sure that the shopper assistance is keeping it nice, easy to access, easy to come up, and it looks nice. So the customer's coming up and thinking, hey, this looks nice, I want to reuse this. So that's part of their responsibility. Then the last best practice, train all store associates. Now that's a little much, but train as many people on doing the shopper assistant as possible. The reason being, if you only have a handful of people that are trained and that person calls out sick, that person is just off that, or those people just happen to be off that day with bad scheduling, or something like, or somebody decides to leave the company and you only have a couple people, there's no hole that needs to be filled. Everybody has been cross-trained, so you can still open those self-checkouts. It could be you think that it's going to be a non-busy day. It's like a Tuesday morning. It's not going to be busy. I didn't need to schedule any of my self-checkout associates. And then the store just, whatever reason, like 3 tour buses pull up and you have lots of customers in there and you need to open those self-checkouts right now. So it's a good idea to cross-train as many associates as you can So that way there's somebody there who can always jump on and open those. So that is the best practices I have for the shopper assistance. Farrell, did we have any questions come in?
Yes, thank you, Jen. Along the way, we did have some questions come in, so I'll jump to those. And for anyone that's on the line, feel free to jump in and type any questions that you have into the Q&A section. So Jen, the first question was, back when you were reviewing flip charts earlier in your presentation, what is the maximum file size for images for the flip chart?
There is actually no max file size. We do suggest that you keep them small. If you come, I have these pulled up right here. They shouldn't be anything more than like 25 kilobytes, and they shouldn't be any bigger than like 300 by 300. You can make them bigger, but the bigger they are and the larger the size, the more it's going to bog down the system as it's trying to load them. So technically you can keep it, you can go up as large as you need to, but it's going to cause the system to slow down. We don't suggest going anywhere over 25 kilobytes or over 300 by 300 dimensions.
All right, thanks, Jen. Can you make a filter for items where it only shows items that we have a quantity on hand of?
Do you want to show those in the flip chart? You want to have a filter that's added?
I think that was a separate question, flip chart question.
Okay. Okay. So with the flip chart, no, but with the item search that I went over with this search items before, we don't have a filter, but we can add lines to this grid that shows the inventory on hand. You can actually add fields to this to customize it to show the inventory on hand over here. If you wanted to customize it to only show the items that have a positive inventory, we could do that. But you can just add the field. There's actually, you can add and customize this to add a large number field, but you can add the inventory value so you can see the inventory number of what's on hand. And then if you wanted to filter them out, we could customize it to just filter out the items and just show what you have it on hand of.
Okay, yeah, they did clarify it was for item search, which I think you picked up on.
Okay.
So you're saying basically it would require some custom work on our end?
Yes. Yes, it would require some custom work. You can just show it without custom. There's an inventory on hand right here. My inventory is not going to be great in my lab, but you can just check mark it to show the inventory on hand without customization. But to just filter it with the on hand, then that would be something that we can work on. You can add it as a field and then filter it by on hand, so it will just bring all the ones, because I have all negatives. My lab has all negatives. It'll just show the numbers up here if that's outside of customization.
Okay, they just added some additional detail saying that they had trouble with cashiers picking the wrong item and they didn't want them to pick things that the store did not have.
Gotcha. Yes. So the question is, I'm sorry, the answer is that yes, we can do that, but it would be something that we would have to customize. So it would be if on hand is greater than or equal to 1, only show those items. Without customization, you can just show the on hand and work on it that way. So that way they're selling them, the ones that are on hand, that you can see what's on hand without customization.
Okay, thanks, John. Another question: when you're adding a customer, what does the risk level do?
The risk level is the amount of risk you want to take with that customer, and what that ties directly to, I'm just going to pull it up in the back office so you can see, but what that ties to is right here. You can set your risk levels to how much credit, if you're doing house charges, you're allowing them to charge up to before they pay it off, and checks. If you are taking paper checks, how much risk are you willing to take on that customer with checks? So you can actually set limits if you wanted to accept up to a certain amount, like $50 a check, $100 a check. If you want to have a manager be called, just always accept checks from this customer or never accept customer checks. So those two are the amount of risk that you're wanting to take with that customer. You can have multiple different risk levels. You can have Like I have this one that I have a credit limit of 200 and they're allowed to accept check of 200. This is 500, 500, or you can set up multiple risk levels. So if you want to allow them to house charge but not do checks, or vice versa, you can set those limits. You can set those up in here, and then you assign them to the customer.
Okay, thanks, Jen. What does the correction button do on the front end screen?
The correction button is, I have to bit to the tender screen. This allows you to, if you are taking, especially a partial payment from on a credit or an EFT transaction, this allows you to cancel that. So you can, not cancel, but correct that. So if you needed to do a correction of the $2 credit that you did, then you would do $2 and then the credit, and then it will ask you for the auth ID. You enter it in there, and then the customer, and it will let you change that. It's also used for eWIC and smart. It's used specifically eWIC. If you took eWIC in a transaction and need to cancel out eWIC, you would use the correction key to correct that tender.
Thank you. Is there any documentation or resources we can look at regarding operational questions for the front end?
Yes, for operationals in each installations of SMS, there is 2 guides that come with this by default. One of them is the SMS help guide, and the other one is in the help users guide, and the other one is the SMS help the help members guide, sorry. The users guide is for operational. So if you go into your default storeman directory, you just look for SMS help users, and this is all of the operational questions. Managers is meant for procedural and for more back-end programming, things like that, but the users is meant for operational questions, and you will find a lot of the answers in here that you're looking for.
Great, thank you. Are we able to add more screens to the point of sale and make adjustments to it if we want to move certain things around, including buttons?
Yes, everything on the screen is, to start off, everything on the screen is customizable. We can move where the screens are. If you don't like where this is, or the scales over here sometimes, we can move all of this around, and we can move any button that you would like to, and we can train you on how to move and change your own buttons. If you are looking to add more button screens up here, so by default, I said that at the beginning, you have the functions in the manager menu to have that kind of streamlined look so you don't have so many buttons on the main page, but you can also add in different menus. So you can come in and we could have a functions menu, manager menu, whatever other menu you would like to add, food menu, something like that, they can be added in here. And we can train you. You can call into the help desk and they can assist you with that, or we can train you on how to do that so that you can do that on your own.
Thanks, Jen. I see 2 more questions. How do we add buttons to the self-checkout screen?
So for the self-checkout screen, as I brought up before, there is SMS runs behind the self-checkout, and then the check software layers on top of it. So what you're actually seeing on the self-checkout screen is check software. So yes, you can add more buttons and you can take away buttons or change some buttons, but we need to go into the check software to do that. So that's something that I would suggest calling in again to the help desk or talking to the person setting it up on any changes you want to make then and there.
Thank you. And can we add in logos or voice recordings for a point of sale or the self-checkout?
So yes, you can do both. You can add your own logo. You see here, I have my default logo, but this logo can be changed to any logo that you would want to be able to use. There's multiple places you can put that logo, and that works on both the front end registers, and you can also update the logo on the self-checkout registers. For the voiceovers, that's self-checkout specific, that can be changed and that can be added on there. that is something that is through the check software. So that's something that, depending on what you're looking for, if you want to go away from the default voices, it may be custom for us to change that for you, but it can be added on, yes.
Perfect. I think that was everything, Jen. Thank you so much for your presentation today. I want to thank everyone on the line for their time. We actually had a really nice turnout today. I hope everyone found today's content helpful. We're going to be following up with a recording, a link to today's recording of the webinar. And hopefully everyone will be able to join us for next month's webinar that's going to take place on October 26th. And the session for next month will be delete batches. So I want to thank everyone again for their time and hope you all have a good rest of your week.